In Japan, when a long silver fish washes up on the beach, people don't gather to take photos. They brace for an earthquake. For centuries, the Japanese have called the oarfish Ryugu no Tsukai, the messenger from the sea god's palace. When dozens appeared along the coast before the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, the legend seemed confirmed. A 2019 seismology study tested that connection across decades of data and found no statistical link. The folklore hasn't budged. The oarfish is the longest bony fish on Earth, up to 36 feet of ribbon-thin, barely calcified body drifting vertically through water over half a mile deep. It has no real teeth, no functional scales, and a body so delicate it disintegrates in human hands. Centuries of sea serpent sightings may trace back to this one animal. The oarfish belongs to a family called Regalesidae, and only 2 species exist. The giant oarfish, regularly seen in photos, being held up by a line of marines or dragged behind a fishing boat. The other species, Regalicus roselli, is smaller and even less studied. Both live in the mesopelagic and bathypelagic zones, roughly 650 to 3,000 feet below the surface, where sunlight is either faint or completely gone. You might wonder how something 36 feet long can hide from an entire planet. Part of the answer is where it lives. The deep ocean is massive, dark, and largely unmonitored. Most of what humans know about oarfish comes from specimens that wash ashore, get tangled in nets near the surface, or occasionally show up on deep-sea camera rigs. Researchers at UC San Diego Scripps Institution of Oceanography have examined beached oarfish and found that the body structure is radically different from what you'd expect in a fish of that size. The skeleton is not heavily ossified. The bones are soft, almost cartilaginous in some sections, and the entire body is laterally compressed into a ribbon shape less than a few inches wide. An oarfish that stretches longer than a school bus might weigh under 600 pounds. That ribbon shape is not an accident. Oarfish are built for vertical orientation. They drift upright in the water column, head pointing toward the surface, tail dangling below, using a dorsal fin that runs the entire length of their body to pulse gently and keep position. This fin is extraordinary. It can contain more than 400 individual fin rays, and it ripples in a wave pattern that lets the fish move forward, backward, or simply hover. The first several rays at the front of the dorsal fin are elongated and detached, forming a crest that extends above the head like a bright red headdress. Nobody fully understands what this crest is for. Display, sensory input, mimicry of something dangerous, all speculations, none confirmed. The body color is silver with irregular dark spots and streaks that may break up its silhouette in low light. The pelvic fins, with paddle-like expansions that gave the fish its common name. Early descriptions imagined these fins as oars, though oarfish don't row with them. They mostly trail behind the body or extend outward. Some researchers think the pelvic fins function as sensory organs, detecting vibrations or chemical signals in the water column. Others consider them vestigial or display structures. Oarfish eat small things. Tiny crustaceans, zooplankton, squid, and small fish make up their diet. They have no teeth. The mouth is small and protrusible, meaning it can extend outward to vacuum up prey items from the water around it. For a fish the size of a sedan, the prey items are laughably small. This is one of the defining paradoxes of the oarfish. It is the longest bony fish alive, yet its diet and body plan place it closer to a jellyfish in terms of ecological role. It drifts, it filters, it occupies space without being a dominant predator in any meaningful way. Oarfish likely exist in every ocean on Earth, from tropical to temperate waters. But documented sightings are rare enough that each one becomes news. In 2013, 2 oarfish washed ashore in Southern California within 5 days. One was 18 feet long, found off Catalina Island by a snorkeling marine science instructor. The other, 14 feet, was found on a beach in Oceanside. Both made international headlines, not because oarfish are endangered or because 2 at once is biologically significant, but because the animals are so rarely seen that any appearance feels like an event. The earthquake mythology runs deep in Japan. Fishermen along the coast of the Sea of Japan have passed down the belief that oarfish sightings precede seismic events. The reasoning is intuitive. Oarfish live in the deep ocean, near the kind of tectonic boundaries where earthquakes originate. If seismic activity produced electromagnetic disturbances, chemical changes, or pressure waves before a quake, deep-sea fish might detect them and behave abnormally, swimming to the surface or toward shore. If you're enjoying stories like this, there's more on the channel. In 2010, at least a dozen oarfish appeared in Japanese fishing nets and on beaches. The following year, the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami struck on March 11th. The timing was close enough that the legend gained traction even among people who normally dismiss folklore. Researchers at Tokai University decided to test the hypothesis systematically. Orihara and colleagues published their analysis in the Bulletin of the Seismological Society of America in 2019. They examined oarfish stranding records across Japan from 1928 to 2011 and correlated them with seismic data. The result was no statistically significant relationship between oarfish appearances and subsequent earthquakes. The strandings correlated better with ocean current patterns and water temperature anomalies than with tectonic activity. The study didn't convince everyone. Folklore is not built on statistics, and the psychological link between a bizarre deep-sea creature washing ashore and a catastrophic event is hard to unlearn. In Japanese culture, the oarfish retains its status as a harbinger, even if no statistical link exists. The name Ryugu no Tsukai persists. It references the Dragon Palace, Ryugu-jo, a mythological undersea kingdom from the story of Urashima Taro. The oarfish in this framework is a literal messenger between the deep sea and the human world, and its arrival on shore means something has gone wrong below. There is another legacy the oarfish carries, one that stretches far beyond Japan. For centuries, sailors in the Atlantic and Pacific reported seeing enormous serpents at the surface of the ocean, long, undulating silver bodies moving through the waves, heads crowned with red filaments. These descriptions match what a surfacing oarfish would look like almost exactly. The elongated body, the crimson dorsal crest, the slow sinuous movement through open water. Hans Egede, a Scandinavian missionary, described a sea serpent off the coast of Greenland in 1734 that was of so great a size that coming out of the water, its head reached as high as the mainmast. Oarfish don't grow to mainmast height, but a 30-foot animal partially emerging from the water, dorsal crest flared, viewed from a rocking ship at dusk, could plausibly be distorted into that description. The Swedish naturalist Peter Artedi, often called the father of ichthyology, never described the oarfish in his classification system, which tells you how invisible the animal was to science for most of modern history. It wasn't formally described until 1772, and even then specimens were so rare and so badly damaged by the time they reached researchers that accurate descriptions took decades more. The tissue degrades fast. The gelatinous body loses structure within hours of death. Museum specimens are fragments of what the living animal looked like. What the living animal looks like based on the handful of underwater videos captured in the last 2 decades is something genuinely alien. Oarfish hang vertically, in open water, barely moving, their dorsal fin rippling with a slow iridescent shimmer. The body bends and undulates like a ribbon in a breeze. The crest stands erect. The pelvic fins trail below like streamers. They look less like a fish and more like a piece of deep-sea architecture that drifted loose. One observation that still puzzles marine biologists is the oarfish's tendency to shed its own tail. Multiple specimens have been found with clean posterior breaks, as if the back half of the body was simply abandoned. This might be a defense mechanism similar to lizard tail autotomy. If a predator grabs the tail end, the oarfish jettisons it and escapes. The fish can apparently survive this. Specimens have been found alive with healed tail stumps, suggesting the break doesn't cause fatal blood loss. A 36-foot oarfish might become an 18-foot oarfish and continue drifting as if nothing happened. There is no commercial fishery for oarfish. The flesh is reported to be gelatinous and unpalatable. They are not listed as endangered or threatened, mostly because population data doesn't exist. You cannot assess the conservation status of an animal you can barely find. Oarfish exist in a category of marine life that sits just beyond the edge of human observation. We know they are there. We know they are large. We know roughly what they eat and where they live. Almost everything else, their reproduction, their lifespan, their social behavior, if any, remains unknown. The oarfish doesn't need to predict earthquakes or terrorize sailors to be worth knowing about. It is a 36-foot ribbon of poorly calcified bone and shimmering silver skin that drifts vertically through the permanent darkness of the deep ocean, eating plankton with a toothless mouth. It sheds its own tail when threatened and keeps going. It has spawned mythology on 2 continents and across 5 centuries, and it remains, after all of that, almost completely unstudied. If you want more stories about the strangest animals on this planet, you'll find them on the channel.